hello, and welcome to this very special roundtable edition of Social Studies in a Snap. Can you smell that? That's the Dark Knight's fear. He's beginning to worry about you, and he's beginning to realize all the grit and resilience you fifth graders possess. We'll keep him on his heels today by discovering more about the Civil War. To accomplish this, we'll travel back to April 9th, 1865 to interview three important people from the Civil War. Yoo-hoo! Mr. General Army Guy Dude, sir? Can I have a moment of your time?
Mr. Army Guy Dude, sir, huh? I've been called many things before, but that's a first for me. I have been called the Gray Fox, but most people just call me General Robert E. Lee.
Mr. General Lee, what was your role in the Civil War?
By the end of the war, my title was that of General-in-Chief of all Confederate land forces. But let's rewind a little bit from that point. Prior to the Civil War, I was named a colonel of the American Army, and I was quoted as saying, "I shall never bear arms against the Union, but it may be necessary for me to carry a musket in the defense of my native state, Virginia, in which case I shall not prove recreant to my duty." So even though I thought there was no greater calamity than a dissolution of the Union, I couldn't accept the Union's offer of becoming their Major General. I resigned from the U.S. Army and took up commanding the Army of Northern Virginia in my home state. I was successful in the war, despite generally being outnumbered throughout my campaigns. My greatest victory is often thought to be the Battle of Chancellorsville. However, in that one I did lose my right-hand man in the war with the death of Stonewall Jackson due to friendly fire. My greatest defeat was surely at the Battle of Gettysburg. I even offered President Jefferson Davis my resignation after that mishap, although he would not accept it. My most fierce opponent in the war was surely Ulysses S. Grant. He would not withdraw from battle, regardless of setbacks and casualties, because he knew he had more soldiers and supplies. No wonder his own people called him the Butcher. My outnumbered forces were gradually reduced in number, and we were forced into defensive positions that did not allow my army room to maneuver. 1 week ago, on April 2nd, 1865, Grant's army cut off our rail line that supplied us, and that doomed our mission. Today, on April 9th, 1865, I am surrendering the Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse, and this means that the war is virtually over.
Wow, you were a very important person during the Civil War, and I find it fascinating that you sided with the Confederacy even though you were against slavery and supported keeping the Union together. Simply fascinating. Our next guest from history is from the medical profession. She even founded the American Red Cross. Please help me in welcoming Clara Barton. Clara, what was your role in the Civil War?
Near the start of the Civil War, a number of wounded soldiers arrived in Washington, D.C. My sister Sally and I did what we could to help the men. We found out that the soldiers had little in the way of basic supplies to take care of their wounds. I decided to do something about this, so I soon organized a way to get needed supplies to the soldiers on the front lines. Throughout the Civil War, I traveled from battle to battle, doing what I could to nurse the soldiers back to health. I was brave enough to go right up to where the fighting was taking place. Many soldiers were comforted by my presence, and I became known as the Angel of the Battlefield.
What was medicine like during the Civil War?
Medicine during the Civil War was not like it is today. Doctors didn't sterilize their medical equipment or even wash their hands before working on a patient. Conditions were so bad that nearly 60% of the deaths during the war were from disease.
Now, didn't you start some major organization during your lifetime?
While traveling overseas, I learned of an organization called the International Red Cross. This group helped wounded soldiers during war. They hung a flag with a red cross and a white background on the outside of their hospital tents. After working for the Red Cross in France, I want to bring the organization to America. It will take a lot of hard work, but I dream of starting an American Red Cross. The American Red Cross will help people recover from all sorts of disasters, from floods to fires to earthquakes. Who knows, maybe we'll even have a major blood donation program to help hospitals stay supplied with much needed blood.
Wow, what a fabulous mission! Think of all the people whose lives you've directly impacted. Now, our last guest from this time period is President Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln, what was your role in the American Civil War?
I am currently serving as President and Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, and I'm overwhelmed with joy today that General Lee is surrendering. I'll need to begin enacting my plans for rebuilding our country back together.
Why, that's marvelous news! Now, President Lincoln, could you rewind for us a little bit and tell us what were some causes of the Civil War?
From the Union's perspective, this is a war to preserve our country by keeping it united. Ultimately, though, the war was caused by the major differences between the northern and the southern states. One difference between the North and the South is that in the North we want to have a strong central government and we want our nation to stay whole and united, versus the Southern states believe that the states' rights are more important and they have the right of secession. In the North, we believe in having freedom for slaves, as in our culture we use immigrants in our factories. Now the culture of the South revolves around plantation life, and even though three-fourths of the people don't even own slaves, their agricultural economy was so labor-intensive they believe they depend on slavery. And in terms of economies, the North, we rely more on factories and industries as we're undergoing an industrial revolution, versus the South depends almost entirely on producing cotton and exporting that produce to the rest of the world.
So, would it be safe to say that the Civil War was partially a conflict over human rights?
Certainly, the South didn't want to change what they considered their way of life, with slaves working on plantations. But many people spoke out and protested against slavery, and they wanted it to end. These people were called abolitionists. The South knew I wanted to stop the spread of slavery, so they started seceding, with the state of South Carolina being first.
And what was the resolution over this conflict of human rights?
The end of slavery essentially came in two different parts. Following our victory at the Battle of Antietam, I issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which outlawed slavery in all slave states in the Confederacy. It was a bold move that added another layer to the reason why we were fighting in the first place, that we wanted to abolish or end slavery. However, the Confederate States did not follow the proclamation, as they thought themselves a different country, and therefore didn't have to follow my orders. There were many abolitionists, such as Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Sojourner Truth, who worked to end slavery, but it was ultimately the 13th Amendment, or change to the U.S. Constitution, that abolished slavery in 1865.
Thank you all for joining me with this special roundtable edition. These future nights of social studies, and I sure appreciate you taking the time to help us learn about some important leaders during the Civil War, some differences between the North and the South, and what was the outcome over this issue of slavery.
It is a glorious day today. I think I'm going to celebrate by taking my wife Mary to the theater in town. I hear Our American Cousin is a great show to see.
I wouldn't do that if I were ye. Oh, but I can't break the space-time continuum by telling the future once again. Enjoy the show, Mr. President. I hear it'll knock you dead. Get it? Got it? Good. Until next time, adios.